Okay. We're just gonna wait for people to join. Yeah, go for it.
Could you still need a reciter?
Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm just gonna wait for the few people that are gonna come here.
I'm so glad you came. It's my friend. I have not seen you in so long. Is this Adia? I didn't even recognize you. So hello. I'm good, honey. How are you? 15. She tried to zoom in. And this is I think my brother's not something. I think this is too much. Yeah, anyone else?
Alright, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. My name is Nabila Jaffer. Just to give you a quick background, I have worked and volunteered with Dr. Shahbaz's charity over the past year, helping them develop their Sukoon mental health line. Just to give you a quick background on myself, I do have a background in social worker, currently working with youth who struggle with homelessness, in St. Paul. In that, we also have been developing Sukoon Helpline, which is inshallah going to be one of our projects that we want to have sustainably growing throughout the next few years, inshallah. So with that, we are here with, sorry about that. So today's event is our 4th annual Breaking the Silence event. Not annual, but 4th series. So today's event will consist of professional insight from the fields of behavioral, clinical, and psychology, and religious and spiritual perspectives on the topic of understanding depression. But before we do the introduction of our organization and the initiative of the Breaking the Silence series, inshallah, we will start the program today with a short recitation from the Quran by Ustada Khaltun Karani.
What am I reading?
Anything that you desire.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب.
So, thank you. Again, welcome to our fourth Breaking the Silence event. As we continue to expand our topics to allow for space on discussion that are rather taboo within our community, through a series of discussion on mental health, we hope to mitigate the stigma within our communities. The Breaking the Silence series events are a platform for open dialogue and to understand the concepts that are often misunderstood within our communities, within our culture and social norms. So with that, by giving you a quick background of Dr. Shahbaz's charity group, by remembering our purpose in life and who we serve, the foundation of Dr. Shahbaz's charity mission began in March 2019 as an organization to honor and preserve the loving memory of the dreams and aspirations of Shahbaz. makes it loss of interest in doing things, sometimes difficulty crying, sometimes difficulty stopping crying, thoughts of death, feeling guilty, loss of concentration, difficulty with eating and sleeping and concentrating, forgetfulness, right? So it has so many different symptoms that can impact us in so many different ways. There are also physiologic, organic reasons why someone might present in this way. For example, if the thyroid shuts down or starts underproducing, people will present with depressive symptoms, and what they need is thyroxine. If you have low vitamin D levels, and us muhajjabat sometimes struggle with that because we're not getting enough sunlight sometimes. And so we'll present with depressive symptoms, and the treatment needs to be also in line with like what's happening in our bodies. So a lot of times if someone shows up with depressive symptoms and it doesn't seem like there's anything in their life that is kind of connected to it, and even if there is, I'll just say, when is the last time you've had a physical? Please have your doctor check your vitamin D levels and your thyroid, because you'll get other symptoms, but this will be one of them.
And calcium too.
And calcium. Do we have a physician in the house? And B12, right?
Yeah, but hypercalcemia, hyperparathyroidism can cause severe depression.
Can cause severe depression. And it's happened where I'll see somebody and I'll just be like, when was the last time you've seen your physician? And they'll say, oh, it's been several years. And there's usually something there. Or sometimes there's something there. And when that's treated, a lot of times like these symptoms just go away. So that's like a really easier fix if it's there a lot of times. Magnesium also, we're seeing a lot of people with lower magnesium levels. So there are organic reasons behind it. A long time ago when they used to diagnose depression, they would say there's depression and then there's a reactive depression. And we don't use that term anymore. Reactive depression, they would mean like that it's a depression that's happening after you've been through something hard. We don't make that distinction anymore. Right now we have major depressive disorder, which is what I described, and then there's dysthymic disorder. Dysthymic disorder is like a more mild depression, but it's gone on for more than 2 years. So it's just kind of continued. There's also depression, and this is not a clinical designation, but when you're a higher functioning person, depression looks different also. A lot of times when you're a mother, depression looks different also. When you have to support your family, depression looks different. There are aspects of the way that you're living your life that to people look very, very adaptive. Catatonia or like moving slowly, for example, is one of the potential signs of depression. But for some people it isn't there. So it's like even thinking about, the people that I've noticed that are depressed, what do they look like? And they're usually more of the external symptoms than the internal symptoms. If someone is reluctant to smile, it's frustrating, it doesn't feel good, or if they're moving slowly, or refusing to go out and do things. But what if they don't have those? What if they have like wishing that they would die, inability to cry, feeling guilty, feeling sadness, right? But they can smile when they're in a social setting.
then we don't realize it, and then we hear, Allahu Akbar, suicide? Or a suicide attempt, what is this? Where did this come from? Ya ilahi nastajiru billah. And it's, it's really frightening. But it's like a lot of that is because we also sometimes don't have a space to contain people. What do we do when we hear that someone feels hopeless or feels in despair? I think all non-organic depression is reactive. What I tell clients sometimes is like depression and anxiety hold hands. And one of them is a problem with the past. Usually depression is I'm sad about what's happened. Right? And that's like my hope and my connection and my lifeline is kind of dwindling. That light starts to flutter. And anxiety is, oh my goodness, is this going to keep happening in my life? What will tomorrow hold? Because yesterday was so dreadful. And so if you just turn the lights on, everyone's had it when you're in a bad mood and someone goes, we're going to get excited and we're going to get cheerful, right? What's the reaction to it? Another sign of depression that I didn't mention earlier is also irritability and anger outbursts. This is more common in children and in teens, and I would say and in mothers, because that's where it's like, are you looking at the criteria for depression? What have I missed? No, someone's got a list somewhere. I must have missed some. And irritability is an interesting one because it comes off as anger, but then the minute that mother stops yelling at her kids, she's just hating herself even more and feeling really guilty and feeling just terrible about herself. Right? And so it's like, what is that about? What is this pain about? And so that when we come through and we just correct somebody, if this stage had a wobble in it, and every time I got on it, the chairs went like this, and you said to me, Layla, this is just not supposed to be this way. It's like, duh, I know. Right? Can you help me fix why it is this way? Right? And so sometimes like telling people to stop being depressed is actually kind of depressing because it does nothing to heal what's happening on the inside and the pain of like, why am I this way? A lot of times people are told, if you had Iman, if you had faith in Allah, then you wouldn't be where you are at. And I think that it's really sad because when we look at the brains of individuals who are depressed, the brain activity looks different. If you look at functional MRIs, even the brain, subhanAllah, is like behaving in a way where it's tired. And more of there's a lot more activation around the amygdala and the hippocampus, and so there's some memory triggering, traumatic memories are more likely to be recalled. And so I think the opposite of depression isn't happiness, it's actually connection. Because I think that depression, what it does is it disconnects us from all of our sources. All of our sources, including our deen. Including feeling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us. Like I might know it, but I might not feel it. And so it's interesting because I do identify as a trauma psychologist, but I treat depression all the time. That I treat it through a trauma lens because something has happened to sap the joy out. And that's a lot of times where most of our work is. A lot of times people don't want to see a psychologist, but they would prefer to see a psychologist than to take medication. So there's a big fear about taking SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are medications for depression. And, there's still a lot of stigma around whether they're addictive, or people assume that a psychologist doesn't want you to take the medications and the MDs want you to take them. And It's not like that at all. The ideal treatment is actually when the depression is really strong is to start with both. Because the medication will help initially get people into a state where the therapy will become more effective. Because sometimes when the depression is so bad, people don't even have the energy to speak. And they can't identify their thoughts. And they can't even get out of bed to come to a session. Right? So that medication is helpful because it's really good at giving you that initial kind of boost to just help start. And so it's important to talk to doctors about talk to your physician about side effects, and different ones have different side effects, and different side effects mean different things for different people. I might be overweight, and even if the chance of weight gain is 2%, that might be too much for me. I might want to utilize an Alsamarai that has a little more appetite suppression, which might be much better fit. I might already be light sensitive, so taking one of them might increase, headaches because my eyes are going to be more light sensitive. So those are conversations to have with your physician. Welcome.
Sorry. No, it's me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're not at all. And so those conversations are really important to have. And I think that sometimes also when individuals are struggling with depression, even the home environment, people don't know what to do. And I think it's frustrating for people that have depression, seeing people in their environment frustrated with them. A lot of times people feel bad. I think that the women struggle so much because our environment pulls for so much from us, and we are obligated to do so much. And so just working with people on, okay, what can I do for you? What things can I pick up for you? And sometimes less words are more. Okay, less words are more, just finding things that are inspiring for people. Self-help books, I have never found them to work. Because usually the content is already there, it's just you're missing that connection. I recently found an app called a Qaria app. Absolutely love it because it feels so different to hear women read Quran, to recite Quran. It just it talks, my heart opens right away. I'm I love this, right? And so I recently experimented with that. I'm subhanAllah, there's just something about, seeing yourself, that having that connection and hearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words from our sisters that sits differently. And so, even the sisterhood of how we connect to one another. And when a sister shows up, there was a sister that was telling me recently that in Tarawih in Ramadan, she was sobbing during the dua al-qunut. And after she was done, people were coming up to her and saying, "What's wrong? Why were you crying? What's wrong? Why are you crying?" So my client was telling me, I'm thinking of not going anymore. I was pretty upset that they kept coming up to her because we've all seen, we've heard and we've been those people that are emotional and crying and sobbing and weeping during, and it's not a bad thing, but there's a code and there are akhlaq to it, right? There are manners. When you are in the presence, when you're observing someone in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and really having their moment, it is none of our business to interfere in that moment. SubhanAllah, and we hear people, we're so connected. When I wanted to go to Hajj so badly, and SubhanAllah, I lived in Dubai, and I had never, every time I tried to do a Umrah or anything, none of it would work. And one spring, I had this ru'ya that I told my husband I want to go to Hajj in the dream. And my husband had factually been there twice before me. And in the dream I said, Amar khalas, I want to go to Hajj. And he said, Yalla, let's go. So suddenly I was in front of the doorways of Al-Kaaba, and they were huge, grand doors. And my husband was busy talking to another man. And I said, Yalla, let's go in. And in the dream I said, I'm just gonna go in. So I went in, and there was this ocean of people. And then I sit and I said, what do I say? What do I say? So in the dream, I said, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik la sharika lak, and I could feel it. And then as I was doing my tawaf, in my dream I tripped on this woman that was sitting on the floor. And as she's sitting on the floor, I sat next to her and I said, you're taking a break, right? And she said, no. And I said, what are you doing here? And she said, I'm not doing tawaf. And I said, but you're right here. And she said, no, my clothes are too dirty. And I looked at her and she was wearing like a white garment. And you know when your whites turn a little yellow? And I was so upset. And I said, no. And I said, you see that fountain over there? If you just let it touch them, they're just going to turn bright white. And I convinced her to get up. And then I woke up.
Did she have a name? Did she have a name?
She didn't. I think she was me. Because I was right there and I never went. And I didn't really believe I was good enough to go. And so I was like, this is me. She is me. She is my bad deeds. She is that part of me that thinks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could not want me there. But I need to go. So I went. And I'm not a teary person, but I cried the whole way. I was crying on the airplane. I was crying from the airport. I was crying in the bus. And I was crying as we entered Mecca. And as we entered the Haram, and the Kaaba was in front of me, my heart turned to stone. And I was devastated. Why is this happening to me? Oh my God, what's happening to me? Why is this happening? I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. This is different. This is different from my dream. Why do I feel this way? Right? And I'm staring at the Kaaba, and she looks different. She's kind of in this dip, but I didn't imagine the dip that way. And it just looks different. And so we start to do tawaf, and it's like 1:30 a.m. We start to do tawaf, and he's like, Layla, do duha, Layla, duha. And I don't want to do duha. I'm still upset. What happened to my tears? What happened to my heart? Why is it closed? And subhanAllah, we're passing, and I'm still like thinking, and how is this? And what if I'm one of those people that they say that Hajj is a physical ibadah? I don't want it to just be a physical ibadah. I want the whole thing. This can't be me. And then there was this woman, and I don't know where she's from, but she was praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Persian. And Ya Allah, this woman wept so badly. All I understood from what she was saying was Khoda. And so she was saying, Ya Allah, right? And it was just like this plea to Allah. And I looked at her, and her face, I mean, everything in her was praying. So my first dua was, Ya Allah, give her what she wants. Ease her pain. And my heart opened. I was like, this Hajj thing. This Hajj thing is about all of us. It's about all of us. We come into this world and we create so much sin with each other. And so, subhanAllah, I really, when we have an opportunity to see another person, to witness another person's pain, we have no right to it. So there is a sanctity to that. And so how we handle it needs to be with so much gentleness. And to really think, why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed me here to see this, to witness this? What can I do? And a lot of what we can do is actually nonverbal. The best that we can do is nonverbal. If we don't know what to say, it's actually better to smile. It's better to rub someone's back. It's better to make a dua in my heart, which she doesn't even know that I made for her. Back to Hajj, when we were in Hajj, it was such an interesting experience that everybody complains about people pushing each other. Everybody complains about everybody pushing one another, but the more you think about it, you think, when we're born into this dunya, our mother's wombs press us and squeeze us really hard. And in our graves before we as we transition into an akhirah, we're also squeezed.
I think only the introverts complain about the crowds.
Right.
I was like, there's not enough people in here.
Right. Well, and then when you go to Hajj, I went in 2014.
So did I.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Allahu Akbar, beautiful. And then when you realize we've got to do this together, like since my grandfather was doing Hajj in 1920, there were lots of people. Like we're supposed to do this together. So you learn to ride the waves because the thawab from this is the rebirth. And so what better way to pass through this than to pass through this with the people that we create mischief with, right? And so subhanAllah, when we're looking at a situation like depression, 1 in 4 will struggle with depression, and that's admittedly. That doesn't mean that that's even, we actually think that it's more. But this is 1 in 4 admit to symptoms that are leading to an actual diagnosis. But I think that the rates are actually so much more. And it's so reactive to environmental things like giving birth, lactation, pregnancy, right? And so it's like our work around it needs to, you either refer to somebody, work is here. I'll have to introduce you guys later. Maria Salditi is one of our art therapists at the Luna's Mind. Serves you right for going. What was I saying? So yeah, we need to think about things in a little more integrated way, inshallah. I really want to hear what you have to say about this, so please join. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Layla. So, Assalamu alaikum. Just to give your
Go ahead.
yeah, no worries. Shaykha Dr. Tamara Gray is the founder of Rabata, where we are right now, an organization dedicated to promoting positive cultural change through creative educational experiences. She holds a doctorate in leadership from the University of St. Thomas, a master's degree in curriculum theory, and instruction from Temple University, and spent 20 years studying traditional and classical Islamic sciences, Quran, and Arabic in Damascus, Syria. Dr. Gray worked in the field of education for 25 years before moving into the non-profit world. She is now both the executive director of Rabata and its chief spirituality officer. Her work includes the daily nitty-gritty of project design, as well as the support and mentorship of hundreds of women around the world. She is an instructor for more than 10 subjects at Rabat, teaches Rabatines, and contributes to curriculum development. Dr. Tamara is a mother of 3, grandmother of 2, and an avid reader and a lover of cultures, people, coffee, and food. So, with that,
I love coffee. I haven't been able to do it.
welcome you here.
Do you want? The problem is there's plenty of room on this, but look what I've done.
Do you want me to?
I'm just gonna do it the way with your 5-years-old, and you just do it that way. You don't bother to make it better. Have a little table, Michelle?
Yeah, of course.
Right here. Right here on my lap. I want this. Oh, this is a good table, my lap. Thank you, everybody. Okay, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for this awesome topic, Dr. Shabazz Charity Group. I'm so happy to be with you on the stage. Sorry I was late. It's a wild weekend for us. We have our annual board retreat, and so we've been in 12-hour meetings every day. So, yes, but here I am. So, I wanted to use the word, I've been using the word mental strength when thinking about depression from the Islamic perspective. So I'm going to indulge myself and use it here today, even though it wasn't in the brief. And so I want to talk about mental strength in depression and spirituality as a coping mechanism from my perspective. Okay, that's what we're going to do here. All right, so first of all, thank you so much, Michelle. What is mental strength is a really important question that we need to answer. For me here today, you can think of the analogy of physical strength. If you have physical strength, okay, so a long time ago there used to be a women's gym over in Roseville. Anybody seen that? Yeah. So I signed up for it, and just so that you don't get the wrong image, okay, I was still in my scarf and in my skirt, okay? All right? But anyway, I signed up for it, and it was a women's gym, and I hate exercise, so I'd be there going, المؤمن القوي أحب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف. Brainwashing myself. You know, the strong believer is more beloved to Allah than the weak believer. The whole time, brainwashing myself. Because I'm 55 years old, and you know, if I don't do something, at least I'll be not effective physically. So anyway, but they closed, which is really a shame. But so I grew quite strong. I did, mashallah. Don't worry, it's gone. But I grew quite strong then, and I had a lot of physical strength. Now, physical health in 2020, before the rest of the world did, I got COVID. I like to do things first. And so I got COVID, and I was 6 weeks in bed. I was a mess. I mean, I was really sick. That was a time in my life I actually had physical strength. So do you see the difference? And you can have physical strength and still not have physical health. That doesn't mean that there isn't a relationship. One of the reasons I was working on my physical strength was to help me against old age diseases like issues with cholesterol and diabetes and things like this. But they're not the same thing. I can be very strong and still have COVID or have a physical illness. So physical strength and physical health are different. And in the same way, mental strength and mental health are not the same thing. I'm not an expert in mental health. I'm not an expert in mental health, okay? I'm an expert in other things. And I think that's why I'm using this word mental strength to relate to the kinds of things I want to talk about. And because when I'm talking about depression, I'm not coming to as an expert in the field of psychological things. I don't know the right terms. But I do have a really good background in understanding how does Islam present the human being in this world of mental strength. So this is the word I've been using. And so if we want to think about that answer, there's a few words I want to add to the analogy. So the analogy, now we got the analogy, right? So then what is it? My baby here. See it. So emotional fitness, that's from Clayton. Thank you very much. She said that the word emotional fitness is used in the field, so I don't actually know that. I just yanked that from somebody. But I feel like it's a good word because it helps us understand what mental strength is. Resilience is the word we're going to hold on to, but I want to add balance and harmony. Harmony, I'm going to give you the example of what I mean by harmony. Has anyone ever been to an orchestra before or done question in the middle of a Muslim group? Okay, thanks. I've been, okay. So if you have, or heard them on YouTube, okay, I'm just going to tell you for 5 minutes today, go home and listen to the orchestra for my example, okay, on YouTube. So in an orchestra, you have hundreds of instruments, hundreds. 25 violins, 25 violas, 25 cellos, 25 basses, okay? But when they play a song, they are like one instrument, unless they have different parts. Harmony is when all those different instruments can be their own instrument and still sound like one song. I'm going to come back to that example later. What happens when harmony or melody is disturbed in a human being? And I think that's part of that mental strength. Okay, so put that in the parking lot. Hold on to the orchestra image. I'll be back. And then balance. You don't know what balance is. So if you're thinking about balance, look at this picture. Just look at it for a second. And inside your own brain, give yourself a word or two. What do you see when you're looking at that picture? Don't say it out loud yet. And then now, I think I'm going to say now, if you could just turn to a person near you, so you guys are near each other, the three of you. It can be 3 or 2, it's okay, it's not strict here. Tell the person next to you what you see. You have a minute for that to share. Okay, what do you see? Give some words. What are you seeing in that picture? 10-second warning. Okay, I'm sorry if you all didn't get to share, but that's enough. All right, so can I have from your group just something that you agreed to together? Support. You guys? Peace? Peaceful?
I said carefully putting things together.
Carefully putting things together?
Like precision, very precise, and the balance is there in the low center of gravity.
scientist over there. Mashallah. Okay, so if you look at all of these words together, you are all seeing something really quite positive here. But I want you to look at the picture again with me now, and I want you to see what's actually there, which is impossibility. Look at this guy over here. That's not going to sit there for more than 2 seconds. But and so it isn't. This is this thing that we are looking for. Sometimes it's impossible. It's sometimes. Go ahead.
I see burden too.
Burden. Yeah, it's a really good word. Those are rocks, guys. Those are rocks. Okay. So balance is an interesting thing. Balance is an interesting word that I believe, and I'll come back to this too in a second. We've been a little bit brainwashed about the quote-unquote need for balance. It's like as though our life is a plate of food. Which actually, like, who really wants a plate of food that's balanced? I don't. I want something delicious. You know? And I mean, we'll put up with the balance things. But I mean, like, come on, for real. Like, when you go to Jannah, you're going to be like, could we give me a balanced meal? No. Where's the ice cream? Or the steak, or whatever your jive is. Okay, so here are the important words I want to look at. I'm actually not going to look at this for a long time. So think about, just put these in your brain and think about them so that when we talk about the Islamic spirituality stuff, you have them in there. Self-awareness, empathy. Dr. Layla talks a little bit about that word of empathy, thinking about that other person. Mindfulness, curiosity. That's a really important word that we're not going to talk about today. But if you really want to improve your life, get curious. Play, communication, and resilience. Resilience is the big word. Now, in the world, okay, one more slide of setting this up here before I. So, what do we need mental strength for? This talk is about depression. I know we're getting there. I promise. But what do we need that mental strength for? We need it because we fight with people. We just do. We need it because this is a very busy world filled with a lot of distractions. Everyone and their brother thinks they have ADHD. I'm so sorry. If I am stepping on people's toes.
TikTok.
But like everyone thinks, I mean, I'm just like, everyone thinks they have ADHD. And everybody wants to tell me how they're neuro special. I'm like, look, I don't believe that. You just don't fit in right with the way people want you to fit in. But you've got the talents you need to do what you need to do. And it is not ADH weird. It's ADH you, and you can manage it. Figure it out. I got other problems. We all have problems. We all have stuff. But one thing we all have that makes us all think we have ADHD is distraction. I get maybe 500 WhatsApps a day. Like WhatsApp, and then email, and then this, and then that, and then the television, and then TikTok, and then someone's calling, wants to talk to you right this minute, because they want to know what eggs to buy. It's like, all this stuff going around. So that we need mental strength to deal with that. Illness. Everyone's going to get sick. Or someone you love is going to get sick. I'm so sorry. This is a fact. This is going to happen in your life. So we need mental strength to manage that. War. Today, mashallah, we had a lovely lady from Afghanistan. She brought tears to my eyes. She's a refugee, and she's been here for only 2 months. So she's fresh, she's a fresh refugee. And she turned to me and she started telling me what she's come from. And she stopped and she said, she thinks that she thought I was Syrian. She said, just exactly like you. And I said, Ya Allah, this repetition of the world. From one to the other. So we need to deal with war. And I mean, no matter who you are and where you live, to deal with war. And then also, the busy box, because we also live in an addiction to busyness. And financial matters. We live in a debt culture. Everyone is in debt, even the Muslims who pretend they're not. And we're just all struggling with money all the time. Plus, change. There's 5 people that Allah has created in 2022 that like change. And everybody else is like, no, don't change anything. And I get so stressed out. I'm one of the 5, in case you didn't tell. I'm like, can we change that? My stress is the other. Something new. And the thing that causes stress, so much stress that can cause depression, is all the stuff going on in the world that we can do zero about outside of dua. And we're all like, except for dua. That's a whole other lecture I'm not going to talk about today. Come to Allah. And then the dunya, okay? The dunya, all of everything I just gave you is one thing. It's the dunya. It's this world. Dunya means something low to the ground. Really quickly, I promise I'm getting to spiritual tools for depression. Very quickly, the medical world has done research around this thing called resilience. They've done research since the 70s. They're looking at resilience of criminals who go to prison. What's that resilience? They've looked at social work and other issues of justice and for all these different fields. My field is social science before education. So in all those different places, resilience research has been done. And in every field, now this is something really unusual in the world of research. In every single field, they have found that resilience, otherwise known as bounciness, right? You get that? Because resilience people are bouncy. Okay. I need that for the next picture. That's why you need the word bouncy. That resilience needs spirituality. That the most important factor in the bounciness of a human being is their level of spirituality. I told you I'd get here. There is spirituality. So, one more slide about that really in general. So, we are Muslims. Depression, in the way that I'm going to define it, I haven't defined it yet, but depression just in sort of a generic word, I would say that in general we're saying to ourselves it's a state we don't want to be in. So it's a state we want to bounce back from, in the simplest form, okay? The purpose of religion, the literal purpose of religion is to help us navigate dunya. Dunya being what? The thing causing all of the stress and problems that are causing anxiety and depression. It's not just, this is a very important sentence. The purpose of religion is not to save us from trials and tribulations. We have a little bit of a convert syndrome sometimes. When converts are coming from really difficult times, they want to become Muslim and be like, yes, I got the big eraser, no more problems.
No.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work, but sometimes that's a big letdown for some converts, especially if they're really young and they haven't matured enough to understand that it's not a pill that you take. But rather, so it's not just here to save us, it's to strengthen us and give us the ability to manage dunya successfully so that we can go to Jannah and have our ice cream or whatever it is that you want to eat that is not a balanced meal, okay? I know you don't want a balanced meal. So Islam offers us mental strength. Unless you're super crunchy, then maybe we want a balanced meal in Jannah, but we can be in different neighborhoods. It's okay, no problem. Come on, you're supposed to, now, come on, switch when I tell you. Okay. So now I want you guys to think with yourselves, okay? Where do we see examples of what might make us think of the word depression in Islamic texts and narratives? I have one clue up there, obviously, but think about it more broadly than the clue, and just think about that for a minute. I'm going to give you 20 seconds of silence. It's going to feel like a long time. Don't get nervous. I will speak again, and then I'll have you share. Okay, so 20 seconds. I'm quiet. You know what you're doing? You're thinking about some examples from Islamic texts and from Islamic history, from what example might you think that makes you think of, oh, that might have been depression. That looks like depression. That was, okay, that might have caused depression. Those kinds of things. Is the brief clear what you're supposed to do? Okay, 20 seconds. That's 20. Okay, is it hard? It's okay. The introverts are like, please be quiet for a few more minutes. Okay, now tell each other what you thought. Or just tell me, we're a small group. Just tell me. Yes, go ahead.
When I was reading Surah Al-Qaha, it just reminded me of the Prophet's life and how he lost so many people. I don't know,
Excellent.
maybe when I was in Berlin.
Excellent example. That definitely would remind us, make us think of the world of depression. Yes?
Maryam.
Alayhi salam.
When
Yeah.
she,
Wish I died before this day.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. Yes.
When the mother of Musa alayhi salam was sending little Musa in the river, she asked the eldest sister to accompany the baby just to make sure
أصبحت
that
فؤاد أم موسى فارغا. She became empty, her heart became empty. Excellent example, yeah.
I think a lot of the example are grief, but like I think in depression of like Yaqub al-Salam when he lost his son, he cried so much it was actually a physical manifestation that he lost his vision. And so that makes me think that he was so depressed that he actually had a
Good.
Nuh alayhi salam with his son.
Sorry, that breaks my heart. Yeah. Good. Anybody else that hasn't answered, or anybody else too? Anybody else would like to share? The same one. Anybody else? No pressure.
When the Prophet is being bothered by what others are saying about him.
Yeah. Imagine. Imagine. So you said something really interesting here, which I want to address before I go to the next page, which is what is the difference between grief and depression, and does our Islamic text address that? I do have Quranic verses for us, so I'm going to get into that, but I'm going to go ahead and just talk about it for 1 second first, so that when we look at the other stories, we have some clarity. I have two very strong personal opinions about this, which I have a whole bunch of salt in the kitchen I can give you. You can eat some salt while I give you my opinion. Do you know that expression? Like, take a spoonful of salt. Okay. These are my two opinions. One is that that depression is a word that we have grown amongst us in this day and age to mean too many things. To just mean too many things. And therefore, we're not able to divide or separate the different various emotions and feelings that we have in that world of sadness as individuals. Which makes us kind of like 2-year-olds, because why do 2-year-olds have temper tantrums? What's one reason?
You can get what they want.
Oh, well, yeah, that too. But because they can't express their feelings. I mean, in the world of education at least, we talk a lot about this, that it's very important to teach children emotion words, because they will continue to have temper tantrums. And that's why teenagers, their emotions get complicated. They start flipping out because they don't have the right words, especially if they're not well read, and especially if they just don't have a large vocabulary, or it's a dual language family where the parents are not speaking the language of the child. Okay? So that's an inability to express how I feel. So language is the only thing that gives us the ability to express a thought or a feel. I'm using thought and feeling right now interchangeably. I know they're not the same, but just for the purpose of what we want to do here. So when we are throwing around depression, not really being able to unpack that, am I feeling grief? So a personal story from me, in 2019, I had traveled to Syria, and the day after I arrived there, a very dear teacher of mine died. Some of you who are attending some stuff from Ramadan, you've heard these stories again and again and again. It was very, very impactful to me. I grieved. I was so sad. I was sad about the years I missed because I was in America. I was also very, very grateful that I was there, so I could be part of all of the grieving of the people together. So when I left, I was like, alhamdulillah, like, I'm so sad, but alhamdulillah. I went to every single cultural grieving thing, and there were like 6 of them. You know, I went to all, and I was only there for a short time. I was really feeling grateful about that. I came back, I'm ready to get back to work, to carry on her legacy, you know. And Ramadan came, and it was that, and then Ramadan came. So as a person who is, my whole life is all about, that's benefit from spiritual seasons and all of this, I was struggling in Ramadan. And I was struggling. I was tired. I was what's wrong with me? I didn't know. I was sick. And I was like, I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then I thought, I gotta talk to somebody, I gotta do something. And I finally realized I'm grieving. I was like, I'm grieving. And once I knew that I was grieving, I was like, all right, I'm okay. I'm perfectly happy to be grieving. This is a human being in my life that deserves me to grieve for her. And that's fine. It is not a pathology for me to have a period of time where I'm feeling sad for a number of reasons around the death of this particular person who's close to me. I learned a lot from this experience, and of course the experience has many more arms and legs, but I learned a lot from this experience because around this idea of what is grief, what is depression, what is sadness, and how we're separating them out and defining them. And in the stories I'm going to show you, it's not always going to be clear. And in the Quran as well, the word hazan is the word that is usually used. And when it's translated, you've got everything. You've got grief, you've got sadness, you've got depression. There's no clarity around exactly what we're talking about. So I propose, for the purposes of what we're doing here, that we mean something that is not clinical. Okay? That first of what I'm talking about, we mean something that's not clinical, meaning it's not chemical. Okay, we're talking about emotions that are responsive to life events. Okay? So Yaqub is the first one. That's the clue, of course, that's his name. I'm going to run through all of these super quick just to give a really quick concept, all right? Yaqub, who not only lost his son, but he lost all of his kids, all of his sons, through one of his sons in the well. He thought they had killed him. Okay? As a parent, it's almost harder to see your child become a murderer than to see a child murdered. I don't know, I haven't, alhamdulillah, been in either of those cases, but just imagining it, like if I have my kids in school, I got one a bully and one being bullied, no, well, I want the one who's being bullied. And I can help her become strong, but that bully, what am I going to do with them? Lock them in a room somewhere? What am I doing with them? Seriously, like I have a really good story about that. Ask me some other time. And one time I thought I was raising a criminal. That was my son. He's a good boy now, so don't be afraid. But like, it's just like, as a parent, you're just going, oh my God, like what's going on? So, Yaqub, the pain is multiple layered. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that a prophet, so he trusts Allah. He trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That a prophet went blind from his tears. La ilaha illallah. That's going to give us some information. Now, in the Quran, we also have Yusuf. Yusuf is not the same as Yaqub. Yusuf is the son. He's the one who was thrown in the well by his brothers. And then dragged off, sold into slavery, and then he's got women chasing after him, which maybe other men might be happy about, but he's not. He's afraid of sinning. And so what happens? He chooses prison. And I can hear in my head someone coming to me saying, Yani, you can't imagine, just because these people are being bad to me, I'm living like this now. It's not fair. I'm so depressed. I can't handle my life. And I can hear this in my brain. I can hear it. You know? But Yusuf, that's how he lived. Maryam, alayhi salam. Maryam, who literally was the exemplary epitome of spirituality. Now she's the one who's pregnant, she's not married. I mean, can you imagine how hard that was for her? Asya, who was married to the worst man ever. How many women have you heard come and complain to you about their husbands? I mean, this is like the Muslim thing, you know? Oh my God, it's either we're complaining because we don't have a husband, or complaining because of who he is. It's literally the Muslim thing. Like it's so not American culture. I just want to let you know. American culture is so weird to complain about. At least in the culture I grew up in. There are many American cultures. Anyway, so it's just, but I'm sorry. Whatever your problem is with him, he's not Pharaoh. He's not saying Ana Rabbukum al-A'la. I mean, he might be acting like that, and he's not saying it. And Asya was capable not only of living with him and managing all that, but actually in the same year, he is killing babies that are Jewish babies. And come on, he knew which ones were which, okay? And it's not like she's hiding. She literally brings one of these Jewish babies into the house and is like, we're going to raise this one. What? Where did that mental strength come from? But yet her situation is one that could denote depression. In Syria, the attempted assassinations of the Prophet ﷺ. Ta'if, where his relatives throw him out and chase him out with stones. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Hijrah, leaving everything, not just for the Prophet, for all of them. And they even got sick. And leaving a country is hard. Leaving your stuff behind is hard. Leaving your money is hard. What else? It's all hard. Uhud, where they were doing well, and then because one small group was like, we can change our mind, we don't want to listen. The whole thing, they thought the Prophet had been killed. Sinatul Hudaybiyah, Sinatul Hudaybiyah, I do that just for you because I know you like my little Syrian things. Sinatul Hudaybiyah, where literally on the surface of it, it was the most unfair treaty ever, not just on paper, but it literally happened in front of them, where after they had just promised that if somebody escapes from you to come to us, we're going to send them back, literally, he came into the camp right there, and they're sorry, I guess I'm going to send you back. And the Muslims were like, this is not only the process, this is the seer, the companions, all of them. There's add two more real quick ones. And then they go forward. What about Ibn Hanbal? Ahmed ibn Hanbal. What about him being whipped? You know that the guy who whipped him extra strongly, hoping he would die because out of the mercy of his heart, so he wouldn't have to endure this anymore? But I mean, and he didn't know. Did we see him? Do we have anywhere that it talks about him suffering from depression or whatever? Even Hazan, you know, the Crusades and Salah ad-Din, all that stuff. Rumi and the Loss of Shams is a really good one, but if you don't know that story, I won't pause on it too much. But he just really he wandered the world looking for this teacher, and because he wandered the world looking for this teacher that he lost, you have people today, I'm fascinated by Rumi, if for nothing else for this, we have people today by the dozens, maybe even more, who come to Islam because they read his poetry. The man has been dead how many years? May Allah make us du'at like this. That our impact is so strong that hundreds of years from now, with bad translations of our poetry, people are coming to Islam because of things that we said. Allahu Akbar. What is that? Subhanallah. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. I mean, all this stuff. Nana Isma'u, who most of her life was facing difficulty and war and struggle and poverty, but she solved things and changed everything around. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq al-Sharif, Malcolm X. Think about Malcolm X. Warren Muhammad. Amin al-Silmi. These are all people that would need a long story to tell. I don't want to waste time if you don't know them, so we'll tell it another time. And so, finally got to what you want. Allah, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. In English, we have here, don't weaken and don't grieve. So again, وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. I'm going to slow down a little bit here. Because here is this word, لَا تَحْزَنُوا. Don't grieve. Don't allow yourself to be in that place of loss, grief, depression, sadness. We've missed out on something. Because why? This one was I don't want to contextualize it. This, whatever is happening to us, if you're a believer, that is the more important thing. وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Don't weaken. وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. Don't weaken and don't grieve. Stay strong. Mental strength. Stay strong. Stay clear in our goals. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَحْزُنْكَ قَوْلُهُمْ. Don't let their words make you sad. إِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Don't let what they say make you grieve. Again, the same word. I don't like the translation here. Okay, it's like this, you know. Don't let what they say upset you, make you sad. إِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا. It doesn't matter what they say. The izzah, because what were they saying? They're putting him down and insulting him and mocking him and all of this. And so the opposite of mocking and insulting is izzah. We can say, yeah, we get that. But I want you to imagine yourself being mocked and insulted for your religion. Lots of converts face that with families. Being mocked, maybe you do too. Like, I know there are plenty of Muslim families that mock the people in the family that become religious, right? So that mocking, but it's all right. Like, we can be a duck. What's a duck? Why do I say duck? What's a duck? What does a duck do? Yeah, other than quack. It does quack, right? GJ? Yeah, a duck's feathers have an oil on them, so it goes in the water, it doesn't get wet. So we can be a duck. We can be a duck for all of those things that are happening to us. Why? إِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ. Because the izzah, the power, is with Allah, and we are with Allah. So, okay, next verse, there's 5 only. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي أذهب عنا الحزن. They will say, praise be to Allah, alhamdulillah, who has أذهب عنا, taken away from us, al-hazan, causes of an addition. Hazan is that word. Again, now they're saying sorrow. I'm sorry, we're never going to have no sorrow, okay? If we are, we're not human. But like hazan, that deep sadness, that thing that makes it so we can't do anything. Inna rabbana al-ghafurun shakur. By the way, except for one thing, in the spiritual world, there is only one thing that will take us down. We just are not going to be able to get over it, and that is when we nuzlam halna, when we oppress ourselves. All the oppression in the world is not equal to how we will feel when we oppress ourselves. I have my dad's friend. My dad, so you can imagine, like, he's in his 70s. Okay, he has a friend who's also in his 70s, and he's our broker. He's our real estate broker. So I talked to him quite a bit, and mashallah, and when we brokered this deal, he came and gave us a donation check. Like, he's not religious, okay? He actually is kind of a Trump guy, but anyway, he gave us a donation. And so now in our fundraiser, I asked him for another donation. He gave me, mashallah, he gave us $200. And yesterday, the check just came in, and I thanked him for it yesterday. Yesterday, I kept thinking about him and thinking about how on the day of judgment, he's going to be looking at that $200 and going, alhamdulillah, I wish there were more of those. I wish there was more of this, you know? And that's what the real hazard is going to be then. I mean, I'm using him as an example because I feel like there's clarity in the separation of deeds. But for us, this thing we're going to be sad about is when we oppress ourselves with sin or distance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think this one is, no, one more after this. I want you just going to the middle here. فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود. No, sorry. Before that. لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Don't be sad because God is with us. This is a very beautiful verse when the Prophet ﷺ was with Abu Bakr in the cave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا تحزن. Be afraid. Yeah, you're about to be killed and slaughtered and found out. The whole movement that you're working on is about to be ruined. And yes, people are standing right outside the door. And yes, things are terrible. But لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Allah is with us. So that strong belief of knowing that Allah is with us. One more verse. إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا. The ones who say our Lord is God and then they stand straight. ثم استقاموا. تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة. So this, I think this verse is very important in the world of Islamic treatment of dealing with our life, which is that the one who says, my Lord is Allah and I'm going to walk on the straight path. I'm going to walk on this path. It's not going to be easy all the time, but I'm going to hold myself here. The angels are going to come down to us, and I have this in the next slide, there's not a lot of slides, don't worry. But one of the things we want to avoid overwhelming sad feelings is to have angels around us. Because there is no environment where there is neither angel nor jinn. That doesn't exist. Okay? And there's no environment where there's angels and jinn. So yeah, you're in an environment with angels, or you're in an environment with jinn. So when we have an environment that has a jinn and that evil and evilness, there is a lot of ugliness that happens on the inside and struggle spiritually. But here, this is one thing telling us how to become an angel magnet is to say, رَبُّنَ اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. Say, my Lord is Allah, and then walk straight as much as you can. And then, then تَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. You're going to have angels coming down to you. And they're going to say, لَا تَخَافُوا. Don't have fear, which is what we think about as anxiety. وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا. And don't have those sad. وَأَبْشِرُوا. And here's some good news for you. بِالْجَنَّةِ. It might not be about right now. You might be going through hard times, but it's coming. All right, last slide. How do we treat depression with spiritual tools then? How do we treat all this sadness that we're dealing with? So maybe now we have some perspective. Mental strength is what we need. The sadness has come before to the people that have been very religious. So number one, feeling sad doesn't mean you're not religious. That's a very important point, especially I talk a lot about the importance of finding joy. And I believe in joy very much. I believe in joy in life. I believe in joy in religion. I believe in joy in the path. But life events should make us sad. We should be sad when sadness is appropriate. But how do we manage those things? How do we manage those feelings and those emotions in order to not allow them to take over? So the first thing is Quran. Now, Surah Al-Baqarah I've been talking about a lot, and those of you who follow me might know that we just started this whole thing, Be Wonderful movement of reading Surah Al-Baqarah every day. Don't be afraid. Yeah, you're like panicking over there. Surah Al-Baqarah. Now, the thing about, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and I have this long history about why, but just simply say that the Prophet ﷺ told us that Surah Al-Baqarah, if read in a house, what happens? Shayateen leave. So if you read Surah Al-Baqarah every day, what happens? Your life isn't going to change. You're going to have trials. You're going to have those things. But every trial that happens to us opens the door to shaitan. Because it's a question, right? How am I responding to this? Am I responding to this with prayer and belief and patience? Or am I responding to this with crankiness and frustration and illat deen and whatever? Okay? Well, with Baqarah, that door to shaitan closes. And so we don't have so many, that voice of shaitan telling us to whatever. So one way to really effectively deal with that the heaviness that comes from sin, from troubles, like we gave you a whole list of things that can happen, is Surah Al-Baqarah. She realized she was going to throw up. Or is she just saying that?
Today.
Yeah. No, I think she's just, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that she's not feeling well. I meant the bathroom's right there.
No, she said, I think I'm going to throw up. Did you hear her?
Yeah. But I was like telling you where the bathroom is in case you need. Sorry, this.
Thank you.
Okay, An'am is another surah that brings angels. When the Surah Al-An'am was revealed, it was revealed with 70,000 angels in one go. And it was such a heavy revelation that the camel that the Prophet ﷺ was on, what do you say? Not kneel, it like collapsed to its kneeling knees, which by the way, the camel isn't easy. And it's very heavy in its power. And so while Baqarah helps us to get rid of shayateen, An'am helps us to bring on angels. Now, I don't mean to say at all that those are the only two verses that are important for this process. And I know that not everybody can read Quran. Anything read of Quran is a blessing, especially if it's regular. So even if it's just a sentence a day, that's better than saying, I can't read Baqarah, so I'm not going to read anything. Quran fiya shifa lin-nas. It is absolutely a cure. Absolutely a cure. This is something we as believers have to believe and know. It is a cure for what ails us, no matter whether that's spiritual or physical or intellectual or emotional or what have you. So anything in the Quran is going to be great. But these two surahs are especially unique, and they're helping deal with the problems of the environments that we live in and the heart that we carry around with us. Now, dhikr, I have the English version of Verily remembrance of Allah do hearts find solace. That hearts find this calm in the dhikr of Allah. The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a practice. And when one has that practice, it is another shield against all that stuff that weakens our ability to manage things. And I know that it's easy to say, do some zikr. But in this day and age, one of the things that I would say the Islamophobic machine has been successful in doing has been separating our community from dhikr. We have rumors out there that it's bid'ah to do dhikr. Literally, there's 25 verses in the Quran, making that number up. There's so many verses in the Quran that tell us to make dhikr. On and on and on. But we have this whole thing in our community. It's like, be careful, it's bid'ah. It's bid'ah to make dhikr together. Who says? This is like, if you're in court, you have to approve the things that you want to say. You have to approve these things. You don't get to just say them and put doubt into people's hearts and separate them from Allah. You don't get to do that. The way the British separated the Muslims in Iran, this is the only, I know this for a fact because there's records, historical records of this, from their religion. There was a meeting and they said, it's harder to do this with the Arabs. We have to start with the language, but with the people of Iran, we can separate them from the Quran because anyway they don't speak Arabic. That we can replace it with the Dua of Fatima. So there's a book in Iran called the Dua of Fatima, and people became used to reading this. I'm not saying it's a bad book, by the way. I don't even know it, but whatever it is, it's something. And it's like a little spiritual book maybe. But the British worked to separate the Muslim from the Quran. In Iran. And if you're just this much aware, you know that the Arabs say, that talk is in the 70s. Now, the Arabs, if you go and do a study of Arabs and the Arabic language, the Arabs don't know Arabic. Arabs do not know the Arabic language, period. They just don't. There are very few that truly know, especially Fusha, especially the language of the Quran. I don't mean modern standard Arabic here. So we are being separated from Arabic, the Arabic language, and the next is we'll be separated from the Quran if we're not careful. But my point here is that we are, I don't know, the Islamophobic machine also came and told us that something about dhikr is bid'ah. Oh, you can't do dhikr together. You can't do dhikr with maslaha. Like Habibi. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu had a rope with 2,000 knots in it. But you can't use a bead. SubhanAllah. Yani, why do we make things difficult for people? I got it. Conversation.
There was a hadith that was reading the other day. A woman who came to the Prophet and they had mustaha and he didn't say anything. He didn't tell them don't use it.
Of course he didn't. Why would he? Like think about. Sorry, so it's so disgusting. But maybe I could have a little bit of that nice gel everybody walks around with. That mustard back there. So gross, sorry, but I mean mosquitoes. Kind of wrong house. I do not. Mosquito is outside. I still kill it. But never mind. If it's on me, I'll still kill it. Okay, so what am I saying? It's like So, but we have to recognize. We have to stop just saying words and recognize why aren't we doing these things? Because we've been taught not to. We've been told, oh, be careful, bid'ah. Yeah, okay, fine, I own bid'ah. I love the word bid'ah. You know what bid'ah means? Creative. Do you know that in Ibn al-Qayyum, he has a list of 9 different types of bid'ah. 9 different types. I bet they didn't tell us this, the Islamophobic machine. One of them is bid'ah hasana. It's good bid'ah. It's literally, there's something called bid'ah hasana. If somebody does something good, and you know what is so cool about bid'ah hasana, which is related, by the way, to a very strong hadith, that if you make something good, okay, and people after you do it, you get the reward for what you did, and for all those people doing it too, without them losing their reward. Like, we have been brainwashed. And we're not learning our religion so that we can be unbrainwashed. And then the other thing is, you can't make zikr silently. Like, I love this. You can't make zikr silently. You can't make zikr in a group. You can't make zikr out loud. Oh, but فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُونِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. But remember me, and I'll remember you, and thank me, and do not be a disbeliever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is juxtapositioning dhikr and shukr with disbelief. If you're not making dhikr, you're not thanking me, then la takfurun. So we are in a scary position with dhikr. And it's not just saying once a day, subhanallah, and move on, yeah, mashallah, and first of dhikr. And all we're thinking about in our prayer is, what am I making for lunch? And what am I doing tomorrow? And of course we are, because we're not practicing. It's okay for all Muslims to do mindfulness, mashallah. I'm going to do mindfulness, but dhikr bid'ah. Dhikr is bid'ah, but mindfulness is not bid'ah. La habiti. Mindfulness is bid'ah too. It might be bid'ah hasana, but the Prophet didn't say anything about the Prophet said a lot more about dhikr than he did about mindfulness. And so, but dhikr the reason I'm having this little rant is because when we're talking about dealing with heavy emotions, it's not enough to have a sentence that we repeat for 1 second or even 10 seconds. It has to be a practice of the heart, where the heart knows that in a hard time, it knows what to do. It's like remember we talked about like this, the healthy body, we didn't talk about it, the healthy body that gets a virus in it, or the body that's been immunized. If you're anti-immunization, I won't use that example, whatever example you want, okay? The body that uses doTERRA oils, whatever, okay? Whatever it is, the body that has the mechanism to fight the virus or bacteria, fights it. You didn't even know you got sick. The spiritual life is the same. We need the mechanism to fight the bacteria, the dunya, the viruses, all the things of the spiritual world, bacteria and viruses of the spiritual world, to fight them. And the only way to get that is through a practice. Just like we need a practice of healthy living to have a body that knows how to respond to things, we also need a practice of a healthy spiritual life. And one of the key components of that, if we're going to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, is a serious habit of dhikr. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, Ya Aisha, Ya Aisha, my eyes sleep, but my heart doesn't. What does that mean? His heart wasn't continuous dhikr. Well, how are we going to get to there? If all the dhikr we've been told is bid'ah, we have to question, what is this that people are telling us? And why? Who made this up? And why? What has been its effect? The beauty of history, or the eyes that look back, is we can understand things. The difficulty of being in something is difficult. But we need to say, what has been the effect on our community of telling us the types of dhikr? Like, tell me something else is bid'ah, please. Tell me chocolate is bid'ah. At least it's not gonna negatively affect our religion. Okay, Michelle's like mad about that. You're on to
I am on my dhikr week, so.
The hadith about his heart, being in constant dhikr is really interesting. Has anyone ever played Tetris or another game and then you go to sleep and you dream about it?
No.
The brain is actually, like, you are actually playing.
SubhanAllah.
And I've had clients in a state of trauma, and when we've done dhikr as part of their healing, you know, because what's dhikr? Dhikr is a mantra, right?
Yeah.
It's okay when we do it as part of mindfulness, but we have our own mantras that we can repeat. And recently I had a client that was telling me, I woke up in istighfar, like I felt like I was doing istighfar all night. And if you've ever played Tetris, which is also a game that they think is actually, there's some interesting research around PTSD and Tetris.
Oh, interesting.
These games that align, like do a lot of sorting.
Yeah.
And dhikr also, like the brain actually is in a constant state of playing it.
For those of you who were here in Ramadan, did you ever wake up and have that song, Allah or Layla?
Oh my gosh, so many times. Like, so many times. And then at some point,
It's on autopilot.
at some point coming in, like, even before until I can start singing, I'm already, like, it's already playing in my head.
That's what we want to be on the inside, you know?
That's what that is.
Even
That's what that is.
Even my
I want to
daughter,
tell you,
my
oh, go
daughter
ahead.
was saying the music today because the last time she came, they were playing the salawat, and she
Yeah.
really wanted that, and she was playing in her mind.
Yeah, exactly. I want to tell you a funny story. Do I have time for funny? I don't know what my timing thing is here. Do I have time for a funny story? I'm good. So in Philadelphia, it's a story I witnessed, not a story I did. Okay, but it's a great story. So in Philadelphia, when I lived there, I met a community of people who had a Shaykha who had died. And so they told me this story, how they all became Muslim. They were all converts. All of them were converts. And they had become Muslim in the 70s. And so the 70s was a period of time where gurus were very popular. A guru in general is a Hindu, but I don't know if Americans really knew that. They just liked this idea of a spiritual teacher. And they used the word guru, and they were very popular. And so in Philadelphia, they found this guru from Sri Lanka. He was Muslim. And they brought him over to talk to people about spirituality. I mean, his name was Muhammad. Like, they were just so, they didn't like him. His name was Muhammad Muhyiddin. But they called him a guru at first. I mean, later they called him a sheikh. But in the beginning, in the history, they called him a guru. But they told me this story. So what he first did with them is he must have been so wise. I never met him. But they said first he would talk to us like about behaviors, like how to live, you know. And there are some really fun stories about that too, but I just want to tell you this one about the dhikr one. And how it changes when you are on the inside, just even if you don't know what it is. So they, you know, like maybe you should stop smoking marijuana kind of stuff. Like this was 70s, all right? People were smoking, they were living together, and he was like, we should stop those things. We're getting married. Anyway, finally he said, I'm going to give everyone a mantra. Now, I'm told, I'm not familiar with these things, but they told me that their expectation in those days at least was that everyone from a guru would get an individual mantra that's especially for you. So like, say say ooh-ah, say ah-ee, okay? Like something like that. So they all got really excited. And he says like one at a time, which I'll come up one at a time, and I'm going to give it to you. So they were all like, one at a time, come up, and he would say, La ilaha illallah. There we go. Next one. Like nobody knew what the other one had. Okay, they all were doing this secret mantra.
Very secret.
And don't tell each other. Don't tell each other what. And then they would sit quietly, and everyone would do their mantra. And so I don't remember the story of how long it took, but then there was shortly thereafter, let's say about 6 months, he began the process of making them Muslim. And at that point, they were ready. I'm not going to say every single one became Muslim right away. There's drama and, you know, whatever, the kind of stuff that happens. But 600 people entered Islam under this guy's hands. MashaAllah. And after he died, 40 went on Hajj. I mean, yeah, MashaAllah. And it started with him because he understood the power of dhikr. He understood, I can give these people words, they don't even know what they mean. They didn't know what they were saying. But there's something about even the light in words. Of course, eventually they have to know what it means. But there's real light there, mashallah. So, yes. And the last one I'll say is service and representing is not deen. I wrote representing deen because I'm looking for a word that we can understand today that doesn't bug us. When we say dawah, very often we think of flyers, and I don't mean that. Or we think of, everyone has their right to live however they want, and I'm just not going to talk to them about anything. Or whatever. But there's a verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us that there are 4 things we have to love more than our families, more than our parents, more than our kids, more than our work, more than our homes, more than our wealth, more than our wealth. And they are Allah, His Prophet. Did I say 4? 3 things. And Allah, His Prophet, wa jihad fi sabilillah. Now, jihad fi sabilillah is the struggle to live right. And the struggle to help others live right. And it manifests itself differently in different decades and different centuries. But today, I would say that we as a Muslim community, we need to begin struggling to live in the shelter of one another. Because right now, we're not, in general. And that by itself is enough cause for a lot of the pain that people are suffering. I'm not talking here about serious trauma. Sometimes that is the reason actually, because we're not living in shelter of each other. Like literally basic Islamic stuff that we should have that causes trauma because we're not. Because when we don't follow this religion, trauma ensues easily. So, of course, there are many other things, but I like the 3 are good. So, Quran, starting with the big stuff. Like, let's also just stop trying to do the little things. Like, we're all in the West, and as Muslims in the West especially, we're all like, I'm going to make $3 million doing this or that. Like, we're thinking about some big business scheme, right? Or I'm going to go to Harvard. Or I'm going to buy a Tesla. Or I'm going to whatever. Like, there's the big thing we want. When it comes to deen, we're like, not mashallah. I'm just going to start small, I'm just going to start with a verse of the mashallah. Mashallah. I don't want to overdo it. I might give it up. Not happy to overdo it. It's okay. If you want to overdo it in anything, overdo it in deen. And it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt you to read more Quran today than to read tomorrow. And I will say, habits are an excellent thing. And if you're a person who knows yourself well enough to know how to establish your habits, then that's different because you know yourself. But for many people, it's an excuse. For some mature people, someone who's like over 40 maybe will really know. Like, I know how to set my habits. And so I'm going to set them like this. And they really mean to go forward. It's not an excuse to just stay with one sentence of Quran a day or whatever. Or Qul huwallahu ahad inna a'tainaka al-kawthar in every prayer. So.
I have a question. The Baqarah, were you saying you guys have a group that read Baqarah together? Or?
It's an initiative is better. So it's an initiative where we're challenging women to read 40 Baqarahs in 60 days. Okay, so a whole bunch of people have joined the thread. We may have to open a second one. And it's really fun because we do have people that are like readers of Quran, mashallah, and they're reading it. We had a convert who read it in 4 hours. We had a convert from Puerto Rico who read it in 8 hours in one day. So these are just people rising to a challenge for this period of time to see, just as a challenge, like how can I do this? How can I, and no matter what, if she's starting out at 8 hours on day 1, even if she only reads it 10 times, at least she'll be at 6 hours by the end.
So can you read it with the Shaykh playing?
Yeah, you can, as long as you read it yourself. I mean, we don't have a lot of rules, it's just an initiative. It's not a game, it's not even a game. Like, I know, we do games with rules, that's
We
true.
were just talking about this today actually before coming, and she was like, we were going to challenge ourselves to read Baqarah daily.
SubhanAllah. Where did you get the idea?
My uncle, I called my uncle today, I was having a conversation with him and he said, read Baqarah every day for like 10 days.
Wow.
Enjoyed it.
Wow.
I did it 2 months ago, but I lasted within 4 days. It was just so long, I couldn't read it because I've never actually read Baqarah in my life before. So I would just sit there and read it with the Shaykh, and I was like, I did it 3 days, I don't think I can do more than that. So we were like, let's do it for 3 days.
Should prescribe it when there are lots of couples promos or a lot of personal experience, it's best to start it early in the day because the shaitan will do everything in his power to distract
How true is
you
that?
from finishing. So the earlier the better.
After Fajr.
And you feel like your day is brighter somehow.
Allah,
It's just
Allah.
beautiful.
And the more you read it, the easier it gets, the physics will
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
On YouTube, there's Suresh reading it in 1 hour, and if you put it at speed 2, you could do it.
There's another one that's 36 minutes. Yeah, I mean, and then right now people are finding all sorts of things. So somebody sent the 36-minute one. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, actually, I didn't know that before, so I have it on. After I read it, I put it on. As like when I'm cleaning the kitchen and stuff.
Yeah.
Just to practice my focus. Yeah. But I don't rely on it for reading because I might miss something.
But you can make up the words at 36 minutes.
I can because I know
Because when you know it, you
Yeah,
can.
when you know it, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, but it would be hard if you wouldn't if you didn't know
I
it.
found the
Right.
2 hour one, that one works for me.
Yeah, find the one that works for you, exactly. What works for you?
It's slow enough for me.
So then open it up to everyone.
Oh,
the
yeah.
questions for related to the topic of depression and for both Shaykha and Doctor, inshallah.
The doctor and doctor.
Double D.
Does anyone have any questions related to that? We can go off of Bakra too, but I guess I'll start it off, maybe. So what are things that people who are around someone who's experiencing depression, what could trigger that person?
The one who, I'm sorry.
So like, you know how we have
Trigger which person? The one who's around or the one who's feeling depressed?
the one who's feeling
Oh.
depressed? Yeah.
I would say it depends. It depends on why they're depressed, what has caused it, what has led to it, what makes it worse. It's so individualized. SubhanAllah, you were talking about like the Islamophobia. We have factions of Islamophobia within our own religion
Internalized
are
Islamophobia.
so destructive. So for example, I had a young woman come to me years and years ago, and she said to me, she had a really harsh upbringing, and her parents used to beat her up to get up and pray. And so she said, I told somebody that I was feeling hopeless and uncomfortable, and she wanted, she was unhappy in her home. Her mother would beat her up, and she said, and they tell me to go and pray. And so when we talk about the healing process, religion is incredibly powerful. And what we know, research repeatedly indicates that people that are aligned with spirituality do better. They have better outcomes and they're healthier. But this is a client who I can't just say to her, it's okay, pray.
Yeah.
Right? You have to help this client, help this individual reclaim her deen. And what I tell people is that the first deity that we worship is our parents. And our parents transfer our worship from them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And unfortunately, a lot of times what they transfer with them is their worldview. And if their worldview is a brutal one and a punishing one, then they teach us to associate that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so a lot of times the healing is in kind of shaking off these traumas, really, and this traumatic attachment to the idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way that you do that is, let's see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about himself. Let's see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. I'm not really reading this. I'm not reading that. I'm hearing this instead. You have 99 names plus for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's beautiful because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that, like, I am what you, and I am however you see me, how my servant sees me. And so in many ways it's very projective. Like, what do you need? Because whatever you need is what you look at. So a lot of the healing and a lot of the triggering and a lot of that really depends on like each person.
Can I say something about that? Because I just love everything that you just said, and I always, I say it just for my uneducated piece of like, I tell parents to respond to their kids, because if they don't respond to their kids, they're going to think when they're in need, no one will respond to them. And they have to learn that Allah will respond. But I want to actually say that for me, if I had someone come to me and say, I have a family member who's depressed, I'm the spiritual / religious person at home, and I have a family member who's depressed and struggling, I don't know what to do. You know, a lot of people come to me as parents with that, and they're like, you know, they want to slap their kids and tell them just shape up, get out of it. What I think my advice to them, it's not exactly your question, because this is maybe not about the trigger piece, but would be to create, if it's a person that is close enough where there's a household, to work to create an environment where there's an angel magnet, to help them at least on that piece. Like read Baqarah in the home. If you can't play it, if you can't, then play it in your own audio. Make sure the house is clean and tahir. And all of these things will really help the person who's feeling those feelings, feeling depressed, feeling sad, feeling grief, feeling whatever, at least not have to deal with the otherworldly stuff that is hard too. Mm-hmm. And I think, as I've seen anecdotally, that's been really effective. But this thing that you talked about, that's spiritual abuse, and spiritual abuse is something everybody isn't yet quite ready to talk about. But spiritual abuse happens with parents, it happens with husbands, it happens with teachers, it happens with a lot of different people, and it's definitely another reason why our community is suffering.
Can I share an experience of, share? Okay. Kind of like you said, how the Quran is like an angel magnet in the house. So, my dad is usually gone, but when he's home and he's not abroad or whatever, he finishes the Quran once a day in the house. And when he's gone, and then he reads the hadith for us, and we're drinking it. Right now, that's why I'm driving, alhamdulillah, because he's here and I'm just here. But like the days that he's gone, you can tell the shift inside the house that either one of my parents are not reading the Quran. Like there's this darkness and heaviness in the house. Me and my siblings are just bickering and fighting. And when I was here, it's just everybody's so in love. We're reading the Quran, we're relaxed. Like people are achieving their goals, and you can even tell like when the people who don't regularly pray, their salah is like back on track. And it's, I don't know, I just thought like you can actually see the shift in the household. Yeah.
Something.
So I just had it's kind of the flip side of that question, where if you're somebody who's struggling with depression, but you worry about like hurting your own family members, how do you have like that conversation, and how do you create an environment where you're not like adversely kind of hurting them with your own kind of struggles?
I think that, the Prophet Muhammad said tadaw, which is actually an order, right? So we need to seek help. We need to seek treatment, because if you're a vital person, then people in your life are going to be impacted. And the way that they're impacted is going to be very different. I grew up in a home where my mother had depression, and we didn't know the name for it. My mom wanted to move back to Iraq. There was the Iran-Iraq war. She hadn't seen her parents. She was a young mother, so she struggled a lot. It probably led to why I entered into this profession. But as a child, I knew that something wasn't right, and I could feel the barriers. And I look at her now, Allahumma barik, and she's well, and I'm so happy for her. But one of Mama's grievances is that she didn't heal sooner, because those are years that are lost. Depression, when it kind of gets into our minds and into our souls, it takes over so many beautiful things. And so, as much as possible, we're realizing the power of movement. And if you think about dhikr is movement, right? Dhikr is movement. It moves you. But even it's like taking a walk, just taking a walk around your home, walking, if you sitting outside, like little things, having moments. Even when my mother was struggling, I remember there were certain moments that were defining. Even if you're struggling mentally, you'll have moments where you have a little more energy. In those moments, prioritize what you can do with your energy. Don't make your energy about going and ironing all your clothes, right? Make your energy, if you've got children, doing little things with them. My mom used to bake cookies. She taught us how to crochet and how to knit. you know, just these little things that stayed with us because you're learning skills. So those things were not forgotten. And those were the things that were helping to anchor because you're building attachment. So, you know, little things. And nothing else is like like any little bit sometimes. It's hard. Our world is so complicated. And, you know, my family came to the United States for my dad to do his doctorate. And so my mom was a young mom with really an absent husband who was just busy on his doctoral program. And so many women have husbands busy at work. And, you know, and a lot of us are raised not to complain. I mean, you were talking about like the complaining, right? So she'd say, you know, he's a good husband, he's just doing his best. And subhanAllah, like we grew up in East Lansing, Michigan, and the community was very vibrant. And so she took those years actually to complete her education, but she also memorized so much Quran. She participated in the masjid. Like that's when she learned her deen. So when they came to Minnesota in '88, she was like, what? I mean, Minnesota in '88, there was just like ICM, and the men would get together in Turkeytown. Like there was nothing, and she was devastated. She was like, I feel like I've lost Iraq all over again. I want to go back to East Lansing, Michigan. I wasn't a blessing. And so, but then they started to build again. And so, subhanAllah, like community is a great source. I do caution parents against taking their children as friends. I find that has the most devastating developmental impact for the kids. And I say to parents, friendly, not friends. You know, I get goosebumps and my skin kind of cringes when a mother says to me, oh, my daughter, Habibti, she's my best friend. No, I'm with you. Daughters cannot be best friends. Your daughter can have 20 million friends, but she only has one mom.
Yes.
She only has one of you, so she needs a mom to be a mom. And think about it another way. If we're besties, I can say things to you and you can say things to me. So it's actually a deception and it's a lie. Because if a mom is a friend, then I should be able to tease my mom, make fun of her. You know, she should be the same. There's no power differential. If there's a power differential, then there's no friendship. So it's not true, and a lot of times mothers use it as a way to get things from their daughters that they are not really supposed to get. And talking to your daughter about her father or your husband is not appropriate. Talking to her about your other friends is not appropriate. Sometimes even talking to my daughter about all of my feelings is not appropriate. This is where I need to have girlfriends.
When my daughter was 13, as 13-year-olds will, she said, you're not my friend. I was like, better than that.
Absolutely. Friendly, not friends. And as they get older, as the power differential begins to change, then they can become more friends than not. Yeah, my mother is, I'm almost 63 and I'm 43. And now I'm really beginning to feel our friendship okay, yeah, right? There's no power differential. We can kind of, and even then, my mother will never be, like she'll always be higher. Like I'll never joke with her like I do my girlfriends, right? There is always going to be more respect that she has than I'm allowed to have in the relationship. So I can be more friendly because clearly, inshallah, I don't need as much discipline. Inshallah. Depends on the day. But even then, it's like there's less of a power differential, but still friendly, not friends.
So much wisdom.
We learn through our clients, probably through the people we work with.
Well, you guys were kind of speaking about it, but I guess with that kind of, I know there's like a term like situational depression, and I know sometimes it's easy to feel like because earlier too in the beginning you spoke about like all different types of depression, clinically or not, but I guess it's easy to feel like maybe someone who's experienced symptoms of depression is just from the specific situation at hand, but when that is like if that is going on for longer periods of time, it's kind of hard maybe for, is there a way to tell a difference between like, if it really is just and even if it is just situational depression, like, is putting that, I feel like putting that in your head, like, oh, it's just this situation, is kind of detrimental too, because then you don't want to do anything to fix it, because you're just thinking, oh, once the situation changes, it'll like everything will just fix itself, kind of. And maybe if it's not situational depression and you're using that as like a cover up, and later on, like, that just gives it time to like worsen. I don't know if this is correct, but I feel like sometimes the longer depression goes on, the easier it is to like ignore it, or the more harm it does, maybe.
A lot of times people use the word like, oh my God, I'm so depressed, right? None of that is depression necessarily, right? Depression is always a clinical condition, right? What causes it, so the symptoms need to be there for 2 weeks, but you don't always need psychotherapy. Like, your first line of therapy is your circle, your family, your faith, your community. Like, you don't have to come to a psychologist. You don't have to get psychotropic medications. That's when other systems don't work. Right? So we're like, and you also want to do the medical rule out. After I had my daughter was 8 months old, and I was really struggling. I was in graduate school. And wallahi, even though this is my area of expertise, I didn't, I would go to these doctors because I was having physical symptoms. And they would ask me, they were screening me for hypothyroid, and I didn't know it. But they would ask me, what are your symptoms? And I was like, I'm cold all the time. I have headaches. I'm gaining weight. My body feels really heavy when I'm moving. And they would ask me, do you, and I had like muscle aches and pains, and they would ask me, are you depressed? And I would say, it's funny, I would always say, no, I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm.
I was in graduate school and I had a little baby. I wasn't depressed, I was stressed.
Right.
And so they weren't checking my thyroid.
They weren't.
They weren't, because I wasn't saying, yes, I'm depressed. But I wasn't depressed, I was stressed. And the thermostat.
I didn't understand. Sorry, go ahead.
Want me to explain?
I didn't understand. They didn't check your thyroid.
They didn't check my blood for a thyroid condition. They didn't run tests on my.
Because you didn't fit the full.
I didn't.
Full
because
profile.
I wasn't saying I was depressed, but I had like these other set of symptoms that were consistent. Because a lot of times hypothyroidism comes with depression. But I didn't have the symptoms of depression. And so when they would ask me, are you depressed? I wouldn't say no, I would say, I'm stressed. I'm in grad school and I have a baby. I'm stressed. Because I was stressed, but the way, and then afterwards, I did turn out that I had, my thyroid was barely functioning. It was like 0.001, My TSH was 128. It was really bad. But I hadn't noticed. And I'm really uppity and bubbly, and subhanAllah, 2 days of taking the thyroid medication, and I was like, oh my God, who turned the lights on? I was back. And it was interesting because my daughter, my sister, who was a lot calmer than me, would hold my daughter and she'd be like, Habibti! And I remember thinking, what's wrong with her? Why is she so jumpy? But then after I got back to my old self, I was like, oh my God. So even when you're in it, sometimes you don't see things. You need other people to give you an account. I remember being in a meeting and I was sitting on my hands because it was freezing, and I was like, gosh. And I was asking people like, why is it so cold in here? It's June, why is it so cold in here? And people were just kind of like, I don't, and then it was like, that was one of the symptoms. So we need each other, ask your people how they're seeing you, ask how they're experiencing you, because even if you're trained, like the thing that was in my mind, I had a professor that when she was teaching us about thyroid conditions and depression, she was telling us about herself, and she was like, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was just sobbing uncontrollably. And I was just like, that's not me. I didn't wake up in the middle of the night. I was more tense and I wasn't as excitable, and I kind of had loss of interest in things, and I was stressed, right? Because it was situational. So I had all the circumstances. I was in grad school and I had a baby and I was on practicum, the program that I was in, by the time I graduated, I had 3 years experience. It was study, practice, which is a great program, but it's very stressful. And so I was like, of course, and Iraq was being invaded, and and I was working in Republican territory where they wanted me to join in the potluck, and they were cheering, and I walked out of the room and I got in trouble for it. And stress, right? I was appropriately stressed, but I also had this thyroid condition, and I had no idea. So it's like, it is actually possible to be in the field and lack the insight, because I can attribute it to other things too. But one important thing is, am I acting like myself? Because when they then talked to my family, they were like, no, you're never so serious. You're never so quiet. And I was just like, oh my God, that's so true. And I saw a video that they had taken of my daughter, and I was in it, and I looked so dull. And so the medical rule out is essential. Because you could do psychotherapy with somebody to no end and give them psychotropics, but if the reason is a hormonal reason, you are not going to help them. And they will feel more broken than ever.
Or even not hormonal, it could just be, like, especially with women who have heavy periods, it could be low iron.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be literally
Yes.
dragging because
Chemical
your
reasons, yes.
hemoglobin is low. That happens to me once.
So I have 2 questions. The first one is, in moments like that, when a person, you can tell either a person is depressed or you're depressed, how, when the person is not coming, and some people, they just like to keep some things to themselves, where personally I'm like,